It is my pleasure to introduce to you a fearless free speech warrior, Lyndsay Shepherd.
All right, so as Serena was saying, I think she so kindly invited me to speak today because I'm the first person where it's public knowledge that I was accused of violating Bill C-16. And in case you're not familiar with that situation, I was a TA back in November for a class in communication studies, and I showed a video containing Jordan Peterson, and it was actually his criticism of Bill C-16. And, you know, I was neutral in regards to this video, and I presented his criticisms as valid. But that was enough to be hauled into a meeting with a diversity official and two professors. And I was actually in that meeting, if you've listened to the whole recording that I leaked, they accused me of violating Bill C-16, which is kind of interesting because presenting you know, a criticism of the bill as legitimate, you're actually violating the bill. But, you know, it was quickly debunked that this didn't apply to the university classroom, Bill C-16, because it's federal jurisdiction. But in an article that was kind of talking about that in the National Post that came out in November, a lawyer did say that presenting Peterson's argument neutrally could violate the Ontario Human Rights Code. So it could be a provincial problem, but it would be a stretch. But I don't want to go on and on about that one incident for too long because I find it pertinent to comment on the cultural trends that I see happening in this country that play into the mentality of the diversity official and the professors that interrogated me. At UBC, there is currently a design project underway, and it's an LGBTQ and trans installation, and it's going to be on campus. And they're going to paint the pillars of a building and possibly the staircase. It's a design competition, so like one of these designs will win. And it's going to be painted with two flags, the colors of two flags. So one is the gay pride flag, which is the rainbow one we're probably all familiar with. And then the other one is the trans pride flag, which is striped with white, baby pink, and baby blue. And so imagine just kind of the stripes on the stairs or something like that outside of the Student Union building. And they have quite a few kinks they need to figure out with this project because they're still debating whether they need to add like a brown and black stripe to the trans flag to represent Indigenous and people of color. Some people are upset that it's called the LGBTQ trans installation because they took the T out of LGBTQ. They would rather it be called the LGBTQ2SIA+. Or something like that installation. So yeah, they have some kinks to figure out. So this installation is being done to promote, you know, a positive environment, show the students that it's an inclusive and welcoming environment on campus. But I was thinking about these claims that they made. Because when I look at the trans flag, I'm fine with the gay pride one generally, but the trans flag, it invokes in me people who are intolerant of diversity of thought, people who have maliciously campaigned against me at my own university, people who are currently using the internal complaints process to try to jeopardize my degree, people who try to get people they don't agree with fired or deplatformed. So you were talking about that CBC documentary. That was Twitter trans activism that got that off. And I believe they're after you also, Barbara, for appearing on CBC and criticizing the, what is it, the sex ed curriculum? Yeah, and all you said was maybe gender ideology shouldn't be in there. And, you know, all of a sudden the prominent trans activists are saying, you know, Barbara should never be let back on CBC ever, right? So, right, another disappointment maybe? Yeah, so they try to get people they don't agree with fired or deplatformed. Unfortunately, I sometimes think of people who are smug and self-obsessed, and I think of people who are power-hungry. And so when I see that trans flag, and let's be clear, I'm talking about the militant trans activists that fly that flag. I'm not talking about people who want to live their lives. It's not welcoming or inclusive to me. It doesn't represent that at all. It does not represent a positive environment. And so what's kind of interesting is 2 years ago, also on the UBC campus, someone burned the gay pride flag. So it was Pride Month. Someone took it down, and they burned it, left the remnants on campus, and this was at first being investigated as a hate crime. But it was soon found out that the person who burned the flag was a 31-year-old transsexual UBC student, and they burned it because her name was Brooklyn Fink, and she was upset with what she called loud and proud trans activism. She said that 10 or 12 years ago, she could walk down the street and people would just look at her and think, oh, this is just an extremely tall woman. This is an extremely tall woman. But now, with all the loud and proud trans activism, people look at her and think, oh, like this might actually be a guy. And so she's kind of upset with the loud and proudness of the trans movement, and that was a statement that she wanted to make. And she said that the UBC flag flying is enough because that represents the whole student body, not just a minority of the students. And I don't think this can be justified to make people hide their identity. You know, that's kind of the trouble with it, is, you know, people can be as loud and proud about their identity as they want, really, that's their right. But I think it does show that there is resistance within the movements, right? And this was an act of resistance. But aside from these small acts, there is a wider mainstream cultural shift occurring, specifically in terms of normalizing the declaration of pronouns. So I get messages sometimes from students, just at various universities in Canada. And one thing that I've heard a bit recently is their TAs, so people who were, you know, in the job that I used to have, in their first class, they would have to go around and say their pronouns when they're introducing themselves. And actually, I know a TA in my department who did the same thing. She obviously didn't like me. And so I give the advice to these students. I say, well, when it comes to be your turn, just say your name. Don't do the pronoun thing. But if the TA then forces you to do it, just, you know, politely decline. Don't laugh or smirk or mock them or anything. Just, you know, politely say, sorry, no thank you, right? I think that's fair. But, you know, it's relatively low stakes in the classroom because there's not a lot of consequence if you do something like that. But, you know, let's start thinking about the workplace. So in the Toronto Star last month, there was an article that came out. It was about how gender-neutral personal pronouns go back centuries. And, you know, they consulted dictionaries, and it was quite a factual article. But at the end, there was this little tidbit by an LGBTQ watchdog organization head, and this is what he says. We need to start normalizing asking for pronouns, not just for non-binary trans people, but in daily life. Why not include your pronouns in your signature of your email? Another thing we can do is include pronouns when we're introducing people. And their example is, my name is Shane. I use he, him pronouns. What about you? Okay. And also recently, the NDP Policy Convention, they had name tags. It had a spot for your name, and then it had a spot for your pronoun. And in a news article I found from Arizona, actually, it was profiling this young trans individual who had they, them pronouns. It was profiling that person and their family. And the news article says, each time the family throws a party at their home, name tags are given to each child so that they can explore whatever pronouns they may feel fit them that week. So it's not even about your pronoun forever, it's about like how you feel that week. So again, I emphasize that workplace issues are kind of where I'm interested in here, because imagine your workplace issues a memo that says all employees must put their pronouns at the bottom of your email. So, you know, you as an individual are required to do this even though you may not agree with the gender ideology, right? Or at workplace functions and events, or like a networking event, you have to put your pronoun on a name tag. And in Canadian workplace culture, you know, you have to be a team player, you have to be cooperative, you have to show you can work well with others and take direction well. So if you come out as like, sorry, I don't really want to give into all this pronoun stuff, suddenly you've got a target on your back because you've become some sort of black sheep, and now management is going to be watching you, and who knows, you might not get a promotion or something, right? Just because you don't want to ideologically conform to something that you're not really confident in the direction it's going, right? So I completely kind of understand the argument that in the grand scheme of things, is it really a big deal if we have to start introducing ourselves with pronouns or wearing name tags with pronouns? Just this morning, I was reading the news and it came to my attention that there's this man in BC who has a flesh-eating disease. And he had to get a chunk of his shoulder taken out, and it infected his bloodstream, and this was totally random. And so I started thinking about like a mass outbreak of like a flesh-eating disease, and like no one can go to the hospital anymore because there's flesh-eating disease stuff there. And then I thought, well, tonight I have to talk about pronouns, and in comparison to a flesh-eating disease, it seems like such a small issue, right? But I still thought, I need to get the message out that our culture still matters, the direction that this country is going, it still matters. And so, we do need to speak out about these things. Because when you let other people tell you you have to introduce yourself with your pronouns or something like that, you're letting other people own you, and you're letting them control your speech and your behavior. And so, yes, it starts with pronouns, but really it's just an exercise in conformity. That could be the end, but I have like a fun fact. Maybe I'll end on a fun fact. Maybe some of you caught this 2 years ago. The Alberta's Teacher Association says that instead of addressing the class by boys and girls, so teachers, don't say boys and girls, call them comrades. Fun. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
So, Lyndsay, if I said I identify as Japanese, I am Japanese. If you do not call me Japanese, I would see that as bigoted because that is the ethnicity I identify with. It sounds crazy and absurd, but do you see, if we could project forward a bit, that how will we stop people from identifying with different cultures, different races, ethnicities?
I don't know about that part. I mean, I watched Rachel Dolezal's movie on Netflix and I actually quite liked it, and I kind of liked her. But in terms of just like the craziness, my little sister is 10 years old and she's doing like a summer math camp for middle school. And I barely believed her on this, but pronouns are banned in her class this summer. You need to use the person's name. They're given a name, the teacher said, and you have to use it because if you use a gender pronoun, they might feel really insecure. Mm-hmm. And this happened the next class. My sister overheard someone say she in reference to someone else, and the teacher said, pronouns, no. Say she in reference to someone else. And the teacher said, pronouns, no.
Lyndsay, you're around a lot of young people in a university setting, and young people are known to be activists and very politically vocal. Have you first of all received support about your sort of struggles that you've been having with Laurier? And do you see any type of movement among young people challenging the absurdity of 72 pronouns now on Facebook? Challenging the absurdity of being gender fluid or non-binary, or do you see more of a conformity culture?
I definitely see more conformity, but I have been supported, and even trans people support me too, mm-hmm. Because they don't think it's like either you can have free speech or you can have mm-hmm. Like human rights, right? Obviously, they go together. Yeah. But in terms of, sometimes I think back to my class in November and how, there was 25 students in each of those classes that I taught. So that day, that means 75 students were taught by me the day that I showed the Peterson video, because I showed it in all of the classes. Yep. And I think, they're watching how all this has played out, probably quite carefully because they were in the room. And now they know how things are going to turn out. And these are first-year students. And so I wonder if they think, wow, you can't go against anything or you'll end up vilified. And so they won't. And that's just that class, right? I'm sure things happen all the time.
And Lyndsay, maybe you want to take this one. It says, since the Monk debate, Jordan Peterson has been asking the question, when has the left gone too far? And the answer seems to include equality doctrine. What's your sense? First of all, has the left gone too far?
I almost think that it's just political correctness in general. There are a lot of leftists who are friendly to this, but they kind of have to hide.
Yep.
And what else did it say?
It said basically that
When did the left
like
go?
this famous monk debate that Dr. Peterson had, and one of the main questions he was asking, which I don't think was ever answered, like now we have like radical leftists dictating these agendas, and when has the left gone too far, and why aren't the moderate leftists calling out the radical leftists?
Yeah, they absolutely should. But I feel like I'm too young to answer that question.
But
Yeah, I mean, the academy is overwhelmingly left in general, though. So I think those would be the people who wouldn't sympathize with me anyway, and maybe didn't agree with what I did in the first place. And that's just, I think it's wrong, but that's just the way it is now. So I've given up on academia. I don't really have a positive answer.
okay.